All right. Hello, guys. My name is Holly Weckler. I'm a senior API FinTech Jedi for Envestnet Yodlee. Want to give people a couple more minutes to join. So if everyone doesn't mind, just sit and type for a second and we'll get started here shortly. All right. Well, I would like to say thank you to everyone for joining today and welcome you to the very first episode in a new series called The Future of Work C-Series Real Talk. But before we dive directly into the new series, I thought it would be important to let you know where this whole event came from. As a lot of you out there may know, last year our company lost our CEO, Judd, and his wife, Mary, in a tragic car accident. But what a lot of you probably do not know is that Envestnet had already sponsored a Chicago Ideas Week lab, and the lab happened to run at the exact same time as Judd's funeral. So we kind of ran into a tough situation. As you know, the show had to go on, but what was a true testament to Judd and what he created in the community was what happened next. The Chicago community stepped up and actually came and helped us build this lab. Yodlee employees, Money Guide employees flew in from across the country. And together we worked and did an hour-and-a-half lab based on building ideas for financial wellness and trying to bring this education to the masses. And this event really took a really sad time at our company and it allowed us to have a little bit of positive moments. We were able to see other people come up with different ideas, and it gave us one moment to not think about what we had just gone through. So as we progress into 2020, where we are now, my series co-founder, Flex, from Muslim American Leadership Alliance, and I found ourselves in a similar predicament. It seemed that everything was pretty dark and pretty bleak. And so we brought ourselves back to the ideas that we had created at Chicago Ideas Week, ideas that were going to try and bring financial literacy to all, ideas that we were really excited and inspired about. And that's where this idea spawned. We also figured, when else are you going to be able to have C-level executives available for 45 minutes? So thank you, Josh from Pangea, for joining us. And so we realized that the time was of the essence, and this would be a great time to allow people to get a close encounter with people that are of C-level in different roles in different areas. So with further ado, I'm going to get started here and let Josh talk a little bit about his background.
Thanks, Holly. What an intro. No, I'm happy to be here. Very cool cause, very cool focus in this super strange time. My background, so I work at Pangea Money Transfer, the GM sort of responsible for all operations of the company today. Sort of my background, I started as a lot of confused college kids do, going to law school, and proceeded on from there to work at a law firm in Argentina, and then also another law firm here in Chicago, Mayer Brown, and was doing some interesting financial deals there, focused on cross-border deals, focused on Latin America, but had an itch to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial, and sort of started looking around. And I came across a group that, I looked at a number of things. I looked at management consulting. I looked at investment banking. Those all seemed to be things that were basically like a law firm, but with a sort of a different Microsoft Office tool to use as opposed to Word. And it wasn't quite what I was looking for. And when I stumbled across this startup scene, it just sort of pulled me in. I really am drawn to, even as a lawyer, I wasn't a litigator. I was a deal lawyer, and I'm always sort of drawn to sort of bringing things together and building something. And so I came across a group that was focused on building a new way of sending remittances, sending money from the U.S. to Mexico. Not something I knew a lot about before starting at Pangea, but now something that I've certainly gotten a PhD on over the last 7+ years. And so what we built is, an easy way from your phone, instead of going to a storefront to use Western Union or MoneyGram, a way for people to use an app to send money overseas. Now, that seems pretty obvious right now, but this is back when Facebook's primary method of communication was desktop and not the phone. So we sort of saw where things were going and built this platform. And the other thing that drew me in is, the company started out of an accelerator here in Chicago called Impact Engine. That's really geared towards social impact startups, which means that they have something baked into exactly what they're doing that is certainly for profit, but also making the world a better place. And so really drawn to the company and what we, our fundamental mission is to help the underserved move money, saving them time and money. And I think we've been able to do that over the last 7 years.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. That was a wonderful overview. I remember when you actually joined the team at Pangea. That was back in the day at FinTech Tacos.
Correct.
Well, we created our wonderful group at FinTechs. And I remember one of the things I loved about what your mission was in Pangea is you guys really took it seriously. You guys were actually interviewing people in kitchens. To try and find out, you guys were doing some market research, right? And I feel like I recall this. You're getting into the market and talking to the people who were the underserved and letting their opinions be heard. And I really like how you said that you're trying to make the world a better place. It's one of the things I love about the Pangea mission is really trying to help people get the money to their loved ones when they need it, right? And so you touched on something. Right. You said 7 years, so I want to kind of revert back to that. So 7 years at Pangea, yeah. That's quite a long time. I remember when we first met, the product was launching, like you were, working crazy hours. So can you talk us through a little bit of how you started, what you were doing at Pangea, and how you got to be where you're at now? Which you're the GM, but I think when we talked last on the last virtual happy hour, it was also Chief Revenue Officer, new role was beginning to. I recall. Yeah,
that's right. So I actually serve as the COO right now at the company, and what I'm focused on is just making sure that we execute it. Now, the reason I think it's actually easier to tell the story as to what I do now if you look at what I've done along the way. And so a couple things. So number one, the company has been, depending on how you want to look at it, at least 3 distinct companies along the way. So we were a pre-revenue company of a bunch of people sitting around an office. Everyone knew everything at all times. A bunch of Swiss Army knives trying to help each other out and with some level of expertise, but really just swarming problems and getting things done, which was a super fun time. And then we shifted about 2 years into post-revenue, and all of a sudden we had operations. And what that meant was all of a sudden, not everyone knew everything that was happening all the time. We had to figure out communication. So that was when we went from maybe 8 to 10 people to 20 people, which sounds like a small shift, but was a massive shift because all of a sudden you have to coordinate across each other. And then now we're about 40 people. We still haven't grown dramatically, but there's another layer of sort of communication that all of a sudden you need to have when you take that next shift. As far as my role, I played a lot of roles along the way. So initially I was, certainly in-house counsel to help, but that was sort of how I earned my keep. That was where I was able to save the company money and do a lot of the contract work that we needed done. But also from day one was leading business development. And what that meant for us, since our product is to consumers, it's a B2C product, what I was doing is helping lay the sort of the payments rails, the fintech foundation of how we actually move money throughout the world. So whether that's a partnership with a retailer in Mexico or a bank in India, building those relationships, with sourcing those deals, and then executing on them. So that really forced me to learn just the nature of that role, learn and build what we do as a company from the ground up. So focus on finances, how do we actually move the money, tech, how do we build the apps to facilitate the communication to move money. Obviously, risk and compliance, a big thing for us is making sure that we're not facilitating money laundering, that we don't get hit with fraud attacks. So I think that was maybe 3 or 4 years I was focused on that and building out the infrastructure for the company. From there, that kind of grew naturally because a lot of what I was doing was focusing on what we should do next as far as biz dev, whether that was new countries, new ways of sending money, things like signing up, do we want to do ACH and implement something like a Yodlee to be able to use those to send us transactions. So that was a lot of where my head was at. So that naturally grew into sort of a product role where I was overseeing the tech team and figuring out what are the new features, how do you decide, prioritize what to build, and actually oversee the engineers to build that. Then I grew into a new role, which was we started a white label business, and that was sort of a startup within a startup. And I founded that to find really powerful brands in the remittance market or offerings that already have consumers, where we can use those as distribution channels and plug our technology into what they do today. And then lastly, into this new role, we call it GM, but it's sort of a COO of the company, that really just make sure that planes are taking off and landing on time and everyone actually is moving in the same direction. So that's a lot of what I do today.
That was a really great story. I felt like I was living it with you, going on the
I think you were,
journey. I know. I remember it
Yeah.
all. Like it's like different cities, different events, and that was a really great summary. But I want to touch on something. You kept saying grew, that you grew into these roles. I think it was a little bit more than just that they popped out in front of you. I know you, and I know your tenacity and ambition and drive. So maybe talk a little bit about how you got into those different roles.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I'll say it in this way, because this is something I've learned from my experience. So like when I'm thinking about hiring somebody, the ideal hire knows how to do 70% of the job. And you would think the ideal hire would know how to do 100% of the job, but the people that know 100% of the job are a little bored. But the people that know 20% of the job, you could say, oh, they're going to grow into it. But honestly, you can throw somebody in the deep end and have them drowned, right? It's not always good to just jump in. So I meant what I said in the beginning, where in my first role, I was doing legal work, and I was sort of excited to get away from legal work, right? But I knew that I was justifying my salary. There was a clear thing: Josh does legal work, got it, right? It's just easy to understand. But I wanted to use that. Okay, that's what I do with my normal time. That's my normal hours. And then I'm also going to take on this other responsibility. And people will, because I'm earning my keep over here, they'll justify me working on the other stuff on the other side. So that's what I mean. And certainly it takes a lot of work to take on new responsibilities. It's something that I've ended up doing a number of times. But if you have a core to work from, if you know the company really well, then taking on one additional task isn't as hard, even if it's all brand new to you.
I think that's great advice right there too. Is it's, taking on that one additional task. It might be a little bit tough in the beginning, but before you know it, then you can take on another one, right? You've perfected that skill and you're able to gain that. I know personally for me at Yodlee, I started 5 years ago as a API community manager, and now I'm working with international teams, working at Envestnet on women leadership councils and women initiatives. So I agree with you there. I think it's important to do your day-to-day, but always be looking for that next area to learn. And from that, I'm kind of curious, I personally know that you guys have always been more of a brick and, mortar shop, but I'm curious to hear from you and just share a little bit about how that's been in COVID, since I know you told me that everyone could work from home one day, but people rarely did prior, right? And now you've switched to a totally different economy here.
Absolutely. I mean, so, obviously our product is super digital and we run everything in the cloud in our office and all of that. But in some ways, we've always been more traditional, at least for a startup, in that we like to get everyone in the same place and like to get them together. And I think even now we are realizing, obviously we missed some of that. It's really hard to brainstorm on a Zoom call. I mean, right here, this would be a very different event if we were in a room and you could read people's reactions and that sort of thing. So certainly we missed that. But we had always had sort of a work from home policy that no one really took, which means that we weren't pushing it hard enough, right? So it was not made easy enough for everyone to work from home. And all of a sudden with COVID, we got a crash course in how do you facilitate everyone working from home, and how, because it's a learned skill, right? It's not natural, both as an individual, but also there's just a lot of water cooler conversations, casual 3-minute conversations where there's a lot of learning or information passed in that. And now you have to force it. So I'll give an example, 2 examples. So one is, we use Slack, like a lot of startups. We use a tool with Slack called Donut, which is randomly assigning 2 people at any given time to have a 30-minute meeting just to create some fortuitous interaction. And it ends up being purely really social, but all of a sudden I'm on the phone with somebody from customer service or somebody from engineering is talking to marketing, and you're trying to create some of that, but it has to be really proactive now. You can't just have people sit next to each other and wait. Now you have to really sort of force the envelope on that one. And then the other is, there was a good article today on this, touched on this. There was, for senior people who know their job and know what they're doing and have done this for a long time, especially if they're doing the same job they've done for a long time, it's not that hard to work remotely. You know how to keep yourself on task. You know what the company does. But for somebody junior who needs those learnings, that's where it used to be that we could be in a room on a call, and when somebody would say something, I would mute it and be like, don't listen to that, he's just posturing, and unmute it. And that's a teaching moment that is really hard to further anymore. And so we've done a lot of, even in that, like really proactive, working with managers of teams to make sure they are giving really proactive feedback. Things like not scheduling every interaction. It's okay, like people are expected to be around their computer so that you can just call them and they can answer quickly, and you can have more casual 2-minute conversations to keep the train moving. So, and keep the learnings happening. But it's hard for sure. It's definitely a new world.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to touch on. I've been remote for forever, it feels like. So it was interesting when everyone went into this COVID era and everyone wanted to do everything video. And, I'm curious how you think that's kind of affected you. For me, I've been very used to just putting my head down and working on certain things. And I travel to events. It was very different. But now my life feels like just one Groundhog's Day. It's just email after email after, it just doesn't really end. And I'm not sure if you're feeling that, or if you've been able to think of anything to do to keep your employees' morale up and break it up. I know Yodlee, we did cooking classes and virtual art classes. We've done great virtual happy hours. I know you and I did a virtual happy hour.
Yep.
Curious just what Pangea is doing and if you've been feeling the same phase. Yeah,
we've definitely done that. We've got 2 offices, Chicago and Mexico. As an aside, it's been interesting because while everyone in Chicago feels further away, everyone in Mexico now seems more integrated into the system because it's sort of an even playing field if everyone's digital. So that's been a perk, is sort of bringing those folks more into the fold. But yeah, we've definitely done some in-person events where, certain teams will go to a park and sit at, social distance and all that, but just some chance to get in front of each other. I'm not sure what we'll do in the winter on that. And one of the issues that we saw is that folks were not taking vacation, right? Our PTO use, I actually don't know now that we've pushed it, but as of July was only half of what it had been at the same point the year before. So no one was taking time off. And you're exactly right. Our first worry, like our general worry about work from home, was that people would not work, right? Which I think is now a silly thing, but that was our old school sort of mentality. Now it's 180 degrees, 100% flipped on its head, where now we feel like people are working too much, right? Because you want to log off at 6 p.m. and then you really don't have anything else to do. And then you get an email at 6:30 and so you respond to it. That's fine one day, but that is not fine over a long period of time. So we really pushed people to take their PTO. And I understand, like, it's still not as fun to take PTO and then what do? You stay home. But it's still better to have some time where you're just not thinking about work and getting some sort of break.
And so I want to touch on something for the people on the line here. I'm aware about the Mexico City office, but can we talk a little bit about how that office started and a little bit about hiring and firing during, these uncertain times?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had the Mexico City office since before we actually launched consumer facing. We've had it for a very long time. We're a licensed financial institution in the US and Mexico as well. And so it's been a really important part of our team, but we've had greater ambitions for Mexico since day one. And we've had this really strange turn of events where we've had a lot of folks in Chicago from Mexico who work in our Chicago office. But for some reason, we've hired very few engineers or product people on the Mexico side. And part of it is it just never quite rose to being a priority. And I think what I've seen a trend across the board is there are a lot of efforts that we as a company or me personally have been meaning to do that this pandemic has sort of pushed forward, right? And one of those is building a team in Mexico. And so we've had the office there for a long time, but what I mean by team is an engineering pod in Mexico. And so we've finally done that, and that's been a part of the pandemic. And one of the things that was the blocker before was always the worry, will that be still part of the team? So they'll be in Mexico. Are they really going to feel like they're part of the Pangea team, or is it going to feel separated? And what's been great is they have, I think what working from home aspect has, like I said, sort of flattened the playing field. And now that Mexico team certainly feels as much as the Chicago team is like they're apart. So it's been a great turn of events for us.
When the pandemic first happened, did you guys, I understand what you mean about the fear of people, working from home, because it used to be, like you said, you had to be more senior to work from home. You had to have certain skills, personality types, etc. How did it work for you guys though, in terms of like internal team? Did you have to let people go? Were you able to, since your product is more digital, did that not affect, you in terms of, I guess in terms of employees versus sales, etc.?
Well, certainly looking back, we would have done things a bit different in response to the pandemic right away. So we did furloughs in response to the pandemic, expecting that people were losing their jobs and they weren't going to be able to send money. That did not prove out to be true. We do believe as an industry, remittances will be down depending on which place the money is going, 5 to 10% this year overall, with people being out of jobs. But digital remittances are up dramatically. And so we actually saw our best months ever were March and April of this year, where we saw a huge surge as people came from the brick and mortar, from going into a store to starting to send digitally. So on the employee front, we did some furloughs worrying that we were going to, really just have to cut back. And it turned into the opposite. And so since then, we've brought everyone back. And we've also obviously added to the team, both here in the US, but also in our Mexico office. So it's been great as we've seen sort of push the digital. And we sort of, certainly we buy into that. We think it's obviously a lot easier to send from your phone than it is to go into a store. But, and so we think that this is a permanent shift, and it's more of an acceleration of that shift, but it's been, really good for our business.
Well, great. Well, real quick before I switch topics, as you're leading me into my next one, I just want to tell anyone who's listening, if you guys do have questions, we will be taking questions at the end. So feel free to enter them in the Q&A box. So you've literally led me right to my next point. So you're talking about the different trends that you've been seeing. And I'm not sure if you had heard about Yodlee's COVID-19 income and spending trends. It's a report that we've been putting out, and we have a white paper on our site that actually discusses all of the different things that we've seen throughout these, throughout this time. And one of the ones I wanted to pull out, which might seem obvious, but it's still quite a shockingly large number, is that in year over year home improvement rates, the numbers for May is 85% higher than it was last year, which, does make sense. Everyone's getting a little stir crazy. You've been at home for so long staring at that door, and now you realize you need a new door, a new home improvement project, something to take our mind away from things. So that was just one of the interesting facts that I saw. And I was curious to hear about what you've seen in terms of volumes, amount of money, frequency. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it makes sense though, right? It's pretty interesting. It's not counterintuitive, but it's cool that you have that actual data. It's crazy. When we first got on this call, I thought this setup was your actual home setup, which in the past would be crazy. But now that we're in COVID, people are like, well, I'm going to be here a while. Let me invest in what's around me, right?
Well, let's give a plug to Pangea for this. I have to say thank you so much. Right? Like, this your home setup? I just came in here to get away from my, my wonderful nephews and get some better Wi-Fi. And Jason Rasnick is like, oh, you're going in the suite with all of the recording. So thank you, Pangea. And go ahead, Josh.
No, that's great. That's great. But we have seen, there's a bit of true shift in behavior. And it's, both in the amount people are sending, where it's actually gone up overall, and and just the overall volume. We're seeing customers come back that we haven't seen for years. We're seeing a bunch of new customers influx to the system, and like I said, so the market might be down a bit, but we've seen this in other parts of the market, right? We're all talking on Zoom right now, and if anyone paid any attention to their stock price, it's sort of dramatic, right? So we unfortunately aren't quite that story, but I think the move to digital is real. And so it's the thesis that we had 7 years ago, and this is pushing a lot of folks that haven't wanted to try a new financial service that maybe are generally skeptical of digital financial services. Now they're giving it a shot and sort of seeing the convenience of that.
Have you seen any different trends in terms of, what countries are, I'm not sure, I'm just thinking that, I know you guys are sending to a number of different markets. Have you seen any influx in certain countries getting more money sent to them or any reduction?
We have, our balance has been pretty steady. I'm trying to think of it's really just been up across the board. We have seen some of the biggest influx early was really sending to the Philippines. And we don't know if that was related to, there were because there's two sides to the equation with any remittance. There's obviously the sender here in their situation, but then there's also the receiver overseas. And so there's the ability to pay, the ability to send money, to have the funds, but then there's the need on the other side. And so we've seen sort of as COVID hits on the receive side, different influxes needs arise. So the pandemic first hit the Philippines much harder than it hit Mexico. And so we saw the influx there where people needed more and more funds in the Philippines for, that was, I guess, March and April that really hit hard. Yeah.
Was there any noticeable changes with unemployment with it?
That we expected to see hit really hard. And like I said, we've seen our volumes only go up. So the industry reports are that unemployment has reduced overall remittances, but for the digital remittances, it has gone up. And we're also seeing folks, because we have people send for different reasons, right? There's some people who've come here to the U.S. and they're supporting their family back home and they might send weekly. There's others who have come to the U.S. 10 years ago and now they periodically help someone back home. Those users have come back much more, right? So the folks that maybe have money but weren't being used for full-time support, they're stepping up and helping their family members at an increasing rate.
That's really interesting. So I'm gonna dive in a little deeper into the digital remittances are actually going up. So I know personally that I've dealt with this a lot working with startups that, are thinking about going the aggregation route to connect to your consumers, data, permission data, right? And so people were just, kind of the consumer fear, and the startups were dealing with, maybe we should just keep uploading the PDF statements, trying to find different workarounds so that, you wouldn't have to worry about the consumer fear in terms of offering this information or connecting to your accounts. Have you seen this change, or have you seen it stay the same?
No, so we obviously accept a number of different ways that users can pay for a transaction. We've got we offer a debit card, and they can use that debit card directly. They can use a debit card from their own bank separately, or they can use ACH to pay. For the ACH solution, we've had folks kind of input directly their bank account routing number, but that has caused a lot of confusion for our users, and B, there's a big risk element to that because if you've got somebody else's check, you've got that information. So what we found was for both protecting the company, but also we're still a new brand to a lot of folks, right? So we're not if you look at the product offering, us versus some incumbents, it's very easy to see on its face when you touch, feel, use the app, how much easier ours is versus theirs. But from a branding standpoint, we're a new player. And it's always scary with financial services to use a new player. So the perk for us to having people type in their account details is they already know their own bank. They're already comfortable and trusting of their own bank. And so anytime we can show that branding to them and show that it's a connection point to that bank, that gives them a lot of comfort. And we've found that to really ease that part of ease that friction in the product funnel. So it's been a really great case for us.
So you mentioned something there that I find interesting and also believe to be true, that your solution's a lot easier to use than some of the larger institutions, right? So I think right now, with the rush to try and digitalize things, there's probably a lot more different solutions that are coming to the market, and different solutions that probably would also come with compliance risks and whatnot that you mentioned. But I'm curious if you've seen an influx of new products and solutions that could help your brand, or what are some of the key insights that you guys have taken to make that user experience better?
I'll talk a little bit about that. So, I mean, I think the truth is moving money, if you ignore compliance and fraud, moving money is pretty easy. It's money came in, tell that money to go there. It's just, I mean, that's a tried and true. It's not hard. It's deduct from this and add to this. Boom. What's hard to do is not get killed by fraud and to not facilitate money laundering, right? So that's the difficult thing along the way. And then the idea of starting something from scratch, having gone through the pains of it, is you know, between getting licensed, between convincing banks that you are not putting them at risk as you move money through them. It's something that is hard for somebody to do, very hard for somebody to do. It's not two guys in a garage who are gonna be sort of competing with you on that, right? So in recent years, we haven't seen a lot of new challengers on the pure remittance space. And in fact, one of the things, you know, when I talked earlier about the white label offering, we have an open API where if you're a different kind of financial service, a different fintech company, and you want to add remittances, but you don't want to deal with the licensing, you can actually add that as a feature to, like, add Pangea effectively as a feature to your app. And that way, if you're targeting any of our, like, any, especially immigrant customer bases, you can bring that in, and that's obviously a really relevant offering for them. So we've seen an influx of sort of helping others onboard to that. But yeah, I think when it comes to easy user experience, at the end of the day, it's like a lot of modern tech solutions. You've got a lot of issues in the back end that we at Pangea care deeply about: how to stop fraud, how to identify the user, how to report out to state regulators, how to keep track of the funds. Our customers don't care at all, right? Our customers are like, why doesn't it work? Push button, money should arrive. And I get it. I'm that customer on everything else in the world. So that's what we strive to do. And so, you know, one of the things, for example, we have, it's a small feature, but it's been really impactful for us, is we have a repeat transfer concept. So if you sent to someone before, now if you want to send again, it's like the immediate checkout on the buy now on Amazon. You hit one button and all the same details are there. You hit another button and the money is sent. And so for us, it's taking friction out of the process. That's sort of been our focus and is the reason that customers continue to use the app.
So curious, random off the kind of side question. Do you have any funny stories for us when Pangea was trying to get into those financial institutions, like trying to get your foot in the door back in the day? I'm sure those discussions had to be a bit difficult. So I wonder if there's anything that you can share, you know, or any advice you could give to someone with an idea on how you should be approaching the financial institutions to be heard.
I mean, one of the things that drove me crazy early, our first compliance officer was this incredibly bright woman, and we would butt heads all the time because I would say, well, Western Union doesn't do this. Why do we have to? And she was like, because they're big enough to pay fines and we're not. So, and there's some truth. It's like anything in life, right? If if you're entry level, you have to dress nicer than if you've already made your $1 billion, right? So you have to kind of play bigger early. And so, yeah, we had to do a lot of that. And a lot of it was, first and foremost, in this world, you like the first thing, it seems obvious, but you have to read the regulation. Like if I were giving any advice to a founder, I would say go actually read the rules and know them inside and out, because you'd be shocked as to how often they ask a lawyer what it means, they ask a consultant what it means, they ask the regulator. And if you're going to try to build something, you want to know what the actual laws say. So go read that and understand them yourself. And that's just true of both true laws, or that's PCI compliance, or any of the rules that regulate our world. And so, yeah, so the other side of it is you kind of have to get in early. It's like any B2B sales, right? I'm sure when Yodlee started its sales process, it didn't go straight to the largest enterprise customer out there, right? You've got to kind of build small, then medium, then enterprise, and prove it out along the way. Similarly, now we bank at one of the largest international banks in the world. That was not our first bank, right? And actually, when we got that bank account, you would have thought we IPO'd at the company based on how we celebrated, right? So early on, it was a local community bank that we went through painstaking details with. And no one's going to do you a favor, but if you put enough effort into it, you can get across that threshold. But it's a painstaking process for sure.
I was going to build off your IPO comment. Do you want to bring us all back through the Pangea journey with fundraising? I know you guys have gone through a couple different rounds, and and maybe even starting with, I don't recall, does Impact Engine take equity? Do they give funds? Maybe start us back at the beginning.
Yeah, so I mean, we went through Impact Engine, which is an accelerator, which they provide sort of contribution in kind by tutoring you. So I think it's a 12-week program. I might be butchering that, but it's a program where they have different specialists come in. They have marketing experts, product experts, branding experts to come in and help you get to demo day. And so they help you really build everything. So you just have this sprint to getting something, not necessarily into market, but a true proof of concept. And then they also contribute some financially, and then they take some equity. So that was the first step. And that, I've heard, like the biggest known version of that is Y Combinator, which has such an alumni now that that's kind of its own thing. That's like sort of comparing Harvard to the rest, right? It's just its own thing. But accelerators, it was actually very good for us. It's not very good for everyone because they do take a significant equity stake. But for us, it made sure that we got the branding that we cared about for social impact, and a lot of the big relationships that we needed, both investor-wise and with financial services, came from some of the mentors in that program. So that was really huge for us. And I don't know if it's relevant for everyone, but certainly good for fintech. Then the next step, so then we raised funds along the way. We raised our series, I'm going to butcher the series a bit, but I think our Series A was led in Chicago by Method and Jump Capital. They continue to be big investors. And then our Series C, by the time we got there, was led by Igmia, which is the largest VC fund focused on fintech in Mexico. And so that's sort of the groups that we've raised from along the way. We've focused on people who, sort of like Impact Engine, who can help financially, but can also help in other ways. And at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, you're building the company, right? There's no way of getting around it. People can say they're going to help, consultants can give you advice, but only the people inside the company are actually building it. So my ambition for the amount that VCs can contribute is somewhat muted, but obviously they provided financing and a lot of great connections, and especially, for example, the group in Mexico, since that's such a relevant market for us, was really great to have some local feet on the ground and local connections when it came to that.
So I'm kind of interested, did you guys ever think about doing any of the fund sharing or doing any of the platforms, or you guys went just straight the VC route?
To answer the question, we didn't really consider that. When ICOs were a craze, I had about a month of thinking about doing that, which I'm very happy in retrospect that we did not. I'm pretty sure most of those were security violations, but happy we didn't do that. But it is interesting. We sprinted to raising money, and that was the focus. And I don't mean, luckily that was not the focus from a, we were still focused on building for the customer. It wasn't a focus as far as the goal was to raise, but we never considered a different path. And I think that if we could have, gotten about 6 months more before, like actually had a product in market before raising funds, or just gone a little bit further before raising, I think it would have actually made the rest of the journey, we would just have been a little bit further along at every step of the way and made everything a little bit easier. So, because obviously money helps you go faster, like there's no way around that. That's why to do it. And anytime you've got a big idea, so do 20 other people, and they're also trying to do it. So you have to go as fast as you can. So I certainly believe in that. But I also think that with each round of financing, there's a new voice, a new board member, a new person pushing you to go even faster. And so you want to make sure that's on a really solid foundation and that you're raising money really as you need it and when you're ready to put your foot on the gas. So generic advice, but I think something that if I'm totally honest, in retrospect, I wish we would have waited a little bit longer before raising.
All right, Thank you for that. And just wanted to remind everybody, we are going to be closing up in the next 15 minutes or so. So if you do have questions, feel free to send those in. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I've been asking around the VC market from March until now. In March, when I talked to my contacts, they told me that they weren't investing. They currently were investing internally. They were investing in the companies that they have, right? For helping them get to that next finish line goal and really trying to figure out what's next because the market was so uncertain at that point. Recently, I've been talking to some of my people in the fintech community and they've been saying they're starting to go out and raise funds. So that, perked my curiosity. And I've talked to a few VCs that said they actually are starting to look at investments again. It's a totally different ballgame though, because a lot of them, I'm sure what you guys went through is all in-person meetings. So now that we're in this whole day and age of Zoom and everything's remote, you can't really build that same personal relationship. So I'm not sure if you guys are, you have any insight or advice for people on how they can, get to the successes you guys have had in this day and age and with the limited resources.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is there's definitely still a lot of money to be put to work. It's a very different crisis than we saw in 2008 when the financial markets locked up. Here, the crisis is about jobs, about people sort of every day, and there's still a ton of money that's available that's already a portion for investment. So there's a huge need, and the people who are in charge of managing that have an obligation to invest that somewhere. So there is a huge need to invest. So there's still a lot of capital around, which was something we had to learn. That was sort of surprising for us. So we're still seeing that. It is the way the market works is you build relationships. If you're going to give somebody millions of dollars, you want to trust them. There's so many things that go into it, but at the end of the day, that's the bet the VC is making. And so I've definitely talked to VCs who have invested without ever having met the person in the last few months. So it exists, but I think there's the fundamental truth. If you go back to, you asked earlier, what is Pangea doing to, create bonds, and Yodlee's having events. Yodlee's having events, but you're not saying this, I am. They're not as good as the old events, right? Like at the end of the day, like it's not to say they're not trying, but at the end of the day, we want to be in person. We are social creatures, right? So there's just a fundamental, very real limitation to that. Even if VCs are trying to look past their own biases, which they're constantly doing, they're people. And so it's still an uphill battle, but they also need to invest. So it's not a fool's errand. It's just you really acknowledging that and doing anything you can to create some sort of bond. And so I think that's easier, but I think that it's like a lot of things. Geography matters. If people can vet you because they know which neighborhood you live in, right? Whatever city you're in, it probably is easier to raise locally, no matter where you are right now. Looking to find other ways to kind of create those social bonds and that social pact, I think is still a good way to think about trying to raise money right now.
I agree with you about the geographic, and I have to say I'm back home in Michigan. I'm getting this office and it's home, and you get the the welcome mat when Michigan people love Michigan
Absolutely.
people, so and Ben Zinga here is born in Detroit. So okay, great. Well, thank you so much for all that fundraising tips. Wanted to kind of just get like a little bit of advice from you on what you would tell anyone out there that was thinking about an idea or kind of looking for their next step, as you are. I feel there's so many traditional routes in life, right? Like I started my career in marketing research, and then I started doing quantitative research, me sitting behind the desk all day long looking at stats reports, right? Doesn't seem like the best fit, and it wasn't, and so I kind of did a little bit of that same thing, a little bit of career searching, and I love my job. I can't imagine doing anything else, right? So what advice would you give out there to anyone that might be in the position you were feeling at in your lawyering days?
So I'll answer this question like a lawyer and ask you questions. So what is it that you like about your current job?
What do I like about my job? It's different every single day. And I have a lot of white space. You talked about some, like the younger people aren't always sure what to do. For me, my job is a puzzle. It's what can we do? And then I think it through, right? And then I get to research and read, and I get to connect with you. I get to travel. Every single day, I'm surrounded by some of the most intelligent people in the world. And they're just open to, lend an ear or give some feedback and advice. And you get to see working with people like Flex, you really get to make a difference. All these women initiatives and financial literacy and I don't know, it's the idea that you can make someone's life better. And, a lot of people think finance is just evil and, they're trying to hurt people. You're just proving it right now that you're not with what you're doing at Pangea, right? So I think finding the silver lining and trying to help others see that there are options outside of their current situation if they're not happy. So
I mean, I think that's, so there's just, no, that's good. No, that's good. The point, I mean, that's because I mentor a lot of young people, I guess people early in their careers at Pangea. And a lot of them, I ask them what they want to be, and they answer they're talking about what they want externally. Like they want a title, or they want high pay, or they want influence, right? But they're not talking about what they actually would be doing every day. And that's what's hard. That's what you want to turn it around, where it's saying, if you love sitting in front of a desk, if you're somebody who just loves to get deep into problems and loves to research and loves that kind of puzzle, then okay, well, there's lots of jobs that are really good for that. But if you're somebody who's like, I do that for an hour and then I need to talk to somebody, but I could talk to somebody all day long, right? That's a different job. And so I think it's like, for me, one of the things I realized is at the law firm, I felt like I was progressing nicely, but I was sort of considered on the same track as this one other person who just wasn't outgoing, wasn't personable. And I was like, how can we be on the same path? Like, I feel like I'm good at this and she's not. And then I realized what I was good at was not a necessary skill for this job. It just didn't matter. Like being, like having any sort of sales to you didn't matter. So I was like, well, okay, maybe I'm in the wrong job if that's what I want to be doing someday. And so I think following that, like even people who hate their job, they don't hate 100% of it, right? So they might, like the people who hate their job hate 80% and love 20. So what is that 20 that actually gives you energy? It's just what do you get energy from? And then you find jobs that expand more on that. And so, and that's what, at Pangea, I think one of the reasons I've gotten more and more responsibility all the way to where I am today, and what I see and where we give other people responsibility, is when the word we toss around is ownership. When they take ownership over something, where you can say, all right, Holly's got this, it's going to get done. And maybe even if Holly can't do it alone, I'm not pretending that whatever it is you'd be able to do alone, but you will take enough initiative to then say, I can do this 20% of it, that's it. But that means I need help from you and you and you, and then and at the end of the day, if we hit a road bump, Holly will come to me and we will figure it out. That is like, that's what the stereotype in startup Twitter is like, CEOs, founders are always looking for more leaders. That's what that means. Somebody you can give a task to, give a project to, and it'll somehow get done. Even if they come back and ask you for things, they're the ones thinking about it and getting it all the way to the finish line. So I think that's the type of thing that it doesn't matter where you are, especially a small company. If you have that mentality, you'll rise super quickly because there's just, we're starving for that sort of mentality.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer, Josh, and for tricking me into that question. Really got me talking about why I love my job right there.
We didn't practice that. So,
I know. That was out of left field. I liked it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Looks like we don't have any questions here. So I'm going to give everyone some time back, but want to just close the series here today to say thank you so much, Josh, for being, our first C-level exec on this series. Love what you're doing with Pangea, really trying to, actually make a difference in consumers' financial lives. And this is why, Mala, Flex, Yodlee, and myself have decided to put this series together. A lot of people are now looking at these issues and these causes because of the pandemic, but Flex and Muslim American Leadership Alliance Mala has been looking at these for a long time, and same as Yodlee. We've been looking at ways to simplify consumers' lives, provide the financial information and literacy they need so that tomorrow is better for everyone. So if anyone has any questions or interested to learn more about Pangea, we've got Josh Gordon-Blake right here, or anything about Yodlee or Mala, please feel free to reach out to Flex or myself. Thank you, everyone, and I hope everyone has a great day.